Welcome everybody to Booze Hour Cloud Edition today. Today I've got on Sander Vinberg. Sander was on with us on Monday on the weekly show, and we had a great conversation. We were talking about kayaks and music. I left some links in the show notes for the Monday show, so if you head over to the channel, everybody that's listening right now is probably subscribed, but just in case you are somebody who's not subscribed, hit subscribe down below, head over to the channel. You'll see the Monday show on there. I have it as the featured content. And so I've got some links to some of the music that Sander was involved in on there. So check that out. Today, we're going to talk about F5 Labs more specifically and talk about the 2019 application protection report. So stay tuned. But first, I have a couple things to run through. I was just waving these things around. So I still have, hold on here, still have a couple of these, if this would focus. All right, I still have a couple of these stickers left. So if you're a subscriber, all you have to do is get a hold of me through any of the means that I'm available. So you can ping me on LinkedIn, on Twitter. I should be pretty easy to find. You'll see my face, and you just look up Boolam. There's only one person that seems to look like me and have the same name as me. You can email me, boo@f5.com. Just say, hey, I'm a subscriber, and I will. I'll be able to send over or mail over a sticker to you. A couple other things. So we have the YouTube channel for the B-roll stuff. So over there, I was uploading some clips, and the intent was for that to be more behind the scenes type stuff that doesn't fit into the regular channel. I think at this point, I've kind of sorted out how I want to organize our YouTube channel. So I'm going to eliminate that B-roll channel. I wasn't uploading too much to it anyways. I'm going to upload the clips directly into the YouTube channel now and just sort them out with the playlist. And then more of the behind the scenes type stuff, you can head over to my personal YouTube, which is just youtube.com/Boolam. And I have, whatever behind the scenes from there, some stuff from the Whistler trip that I did share on the channel, which seemed to get some good feedback, and people were interested in some of the stuff I was doing there. So there's some further stuff on Whistler on there. I just got a drone recently, so you can see my crappy drone flying. I'm still trying to get a little bit better than that, but it takes a bit of time. So if you want the behind the scenes stuff, you can head there. There's also an Instagram page for Booze Hour, which has clips uploaded to it, and the various thumbnails that I create are uploaded to there. And I'm going to try to do more behind the scenes stuff on there, or you could just follow my regular Instagram as well. Let's see. Also, for those of you who have been receiving the weekly newsletter directly from Daryl, we've mentioned it many times now, but that is coming to an end. It will turn into a monthly newsletter instead, and the weekly newsletter will still remain. However, two ways to get the weekly newsletter. Number one, the weekly newsletter is kind of in a text format, and it's in the show notes of the weekly update. So if folks haven't noticed that already, you click show more on the description of the weekly update, and all the contents of the weekly newsletter is actually inside. Well, most of the contents is inside of there. And also there's darylandboo.com. So if you head over there, put in your name, email address, that's all that we need. Then I can just send you I can send you the weekly technical newsletter from there. And then from that newsletter, I'll include more content through there. Right now, with it going out weekly directly from Daryl, I'm trying to keep it compressed, but I can put in more information and be a little bit more dynamic about it if I put it through there. Also, that streamlines things for me, so I can just concentrate on having one place that I can put all the info. So that's all the announcements. I will go ahead and bring on Sander now. Hey, Sander, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. I've been working on your kayak in the last couple of days here.
Yeah. No, it's funny because it's like you work a little bit and then you got to wait for some epoxy to dry. So, and then you work a little bit more, and so I'm trying to make sure that I put in a little bit of time every night after work, and it's really, really fun. It's really, really cool, but it still looks nothing like a boat. It still looks like a bunch of plywood. So it's like I'm looking at this thing and I'm realizing, okay, this boat's not going to float this summer. If I'm lucky, it'll float next summer. But yeah, it's fun.
So hold on, let me get so people know what you were talking about here, I'm going to bring up the boat web page. I didn't really plan this, but let me share the screen that I have here. So this came up on the weekly update, and we were talking about these boats, or these kayaks, where it's a kit and you can build it. So does it actually, like, that looks amazing. Does it actually come out looking like that when you're done?
I hope so. So it's funny. What you see there in the end product is a combination of, it's actually like a kind of a fancy wood that they use for the plywood called okume. And it's not quite that bright when it's unfinished, but it's an interesting looking and a nice looking wood. And then on top of that, there'll be one layer of fiberglass that turns completely clear, and then the epoxy really sort of like brightens up the wood, and then there's also a layer of varnish on top of that. But like in those photos, like that's their own showroom, right? So whoever's building those ones has probably built 400 of these things. So I'm hoping I can come out as good as that. But I bought like the hatch kit and the rigging kit and everything, so theoretically it'll come out looking something like that. I don't know. I am stoked that all of the early epoxy work that I'm doing now while I'm learning the ropes, that's all going to be inward facing stuff. So by the time I actually get to the outer epoxy of the hull, hopefully I'll be a little better at it.
That is good then. People won't necessarily see the other work that you've done. The other thing I'll show too here is this is in the show notes as well. And I thought this was awesome because and I know we'll have viewers from Seattle that will check this out. So you guys are on the Seattle Great Wheel, and you hauled your base, your full upright base, into there and managed to squeeze it on. And then you guys played. Did you guys play one song, or you guys played multiple? This is just the one song.
We did a couple tunes. I think that's the only video that we published, but it was actually a really cool opportunity because that was in 2014, and that was like right when the wheel was built, and they actually hadn't really opened it up for public use yet. And so what that was, we shot this video as promo because when they unveiled the wheel, they had like a mini music festival, and our band headlined it. Oh, cool. And it was a wild thing because they actually hooked up and coordinated the lights of the wheel with the music. And so we were standing out on the pier playing at night. It was I think it was in October. You can see this date is September 29th. So it was like October 10th or something. And we were playing at night, and there were like, I don't know, maybe somewhere between a couple hundred, maybe maximum 1,000 people on the other side of the pier. And they were listening to the tunes, and probably we just looked like a bunch of little figures, but then the whole wheel was lit up, and it was a trip. So we went in and shot this with the sort of permission of the folks running the wheel to do a promo for the show. And the whole thing was just it was a blast. We had a really fun time.
That is really cool. Yeah. I wonder if they still use the fancy lights then for the wheel for other events.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to admit, I haven't been down to the waterfront in a while. Partly because they were doing all the construction, bringing down the viaduct. I think they still are doing that. And I used to work downtown. Don't go downtown all that much anymore, so I'm not really sure what the wheel's up to. But hopefully they still do, because when it went up, I think a lot of Seattle folks were kind of grouchy about it. But now we think it's cool.
Yeah, a lot of things are like that, hey?
Yeah, right.
People don't like development, but when it's done, they start to enjoy it, then they warm up to it.
Yeah.
Cool. So we were just talking about, you are a fan of British Columbia. You've been up to our events a couple times, so I thought it'd be appropriate to have you on and kind of continue on with that. You've been up to Victoria for the Information Security and Privacy Conference. You've been to BC Aware, I believe it was, as well. Yes, it was BC Aware, the ACA event that we have in every February as well. So you are a veteran at coming up to BC at this point, and have been speaking to our customers. So I thought it'd be great to have you on, and we can talk further about the 2019 application protection report. But before that, maybe you can just give a little bit of an intro on yourself and F5 Labs, and how F5 Labs fits into F5.
Yeah, well, I will start with F5 Labs because I think that what I do there will make a little bit more sense once everyone knows kind of how that team works. So Labs is kind of an interesting smaller team within F5, one of the many security research teams at F5, and we have a sort of a specific charter to do research that is essentially independent of F5 products, that is about sort of the state of application security in general. And we tend to do kind of three different things at once. We have a sort of threat. I shouldn't call it a threat feed because that's a very specific term. But essentially, we have an ongoing series of articles about emerging threats, like this new piece of malware is wreaking havoc, or this new attack technique is something we're seeing a lot in the wild. And we do the threat stuff. We also have some longer term pieces that that are more about trends over a long time. And so like that one of those research projects, the application protection report, that's the one that I'm the lead researcher on. We also have another one about TLS and the state of encryption on the web, as well as phishing and fraud. And then we also have a sort of 101 introduction to security concepts part of the site called the Learning Center, which one of our writers, Debbie Walkowski, writes the EDU pieces, and they're really popular. People love the 101 stuff, and I think it sort of illustrates how broad our field is. And so even if you've been working in security for a long time, there's still going to be some stuff that you need to go back to the 101 level and refresh yourself on. So so we do all that, and essentially what we're trying to do is put information, put intelligence in the hands of security practitioners, in the hands of defenders, so that we can all do a better job. And I think the background for that is that I think everybody in the security industry is working with less information and less intelligence than they'd like, right? And just even knowing what's going on in your own network is a surprisingly hard challenge. And so what we're trying to do is really collect as much data as we can. We really strive to be data driven, and then actually come up with some conclusions that are news to people, right? And so that's what F5 Labs does. We do that in conjunction with, we collaborate with a lot of other folks within F5 to get data and get perspectives, including some of the researchers in Tel Aviv, including the CERT, as well as we work with some outside partners to get some intel there. So that's Labs. And I am one of the researchers and writers and evangelists for F5 Labs. My background in security is a little bit of a snaky path. I got into information security about a decade ago, and I was doing a master's at UW at the time, and the folks who were teaching the information security course happened, or specifically one of the instructors, he and I sort of shared a couple perspectives about other topics. And in fact, like one of the things that got the ball rolling was that this instructor, Mike Simon, used to use an anthropology paper to illustrate points about understanding risk and communicating risk in information security, and sort of how culture inflects how we think about risk. And I have a fairly deep background in anthropology, so we started talking about that. And eventually we shared a lot of perspectives, and he sort of took me under his wing. In turn, he introduced me to Ray Pompon, and I worked with Ray for some time. And Ray is now the director of F5 Labs. And so after a while, I sort of basically, due to my own fault, I sort of struggled to move forward in information security for a few years. And so I ended up working more in geopolitical risk and doing more stuff about, I was working as a contractor for a very large company in the Northwest, essentially giving them an assessment of like, what is the likelihood of regime change in this nation state in the next couple of years? What is the likelihood of sort of a cultural fracture, a linguistic cultural fracture in this nation state over the next few years? So I was doing that sort of geopolitical risk for a while, and Ray reached out and brought me back into Labs. And I had a bit of a slow ramp up, I think, because I was a little bit out of the security field. I had to familiarize myself, but since then it's been a really wonderful team to work with. The charter really fits my skill set, and yeah, I'm having a ball. It's a really cool project, I like to think that we're doing work that is really valuable to the industry, hopefully.
Yeah, that is a really cool background to bring to F5 Labs. Like I'm guessing, well, between anthropology and geopolitical, and then tying that in with information security, just a really cool lens to be able to look at things.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It's definitely a different lens, and that's, I think, part of why my path in security was very straightforward. Because to be totally honest, I had some conversations with folks in the beginning, and they essentially were looking for a certain type, like someone who had been doing pen testing for a few years and then wanted to go more into the blue side. And I wasn't that type at all. And my background is in like history and anthropology, or at least my deep background. And I actually spent a few years working in emergency medicine before I went to grad school. So I was like this total left field candidate, and it took me a while to sort of figure out. Well, I just had to learn more, right? But it also took me a while to sort of figure out how to position myself within this field so that other people would value what my work was. Eventually, very much, I think, due to the help of these mentors like Ray and like Mike Simon, eventually I sort of figured out a niche, and I feel fortunate, right? Because not everybody gets as much advocacy and mentorship as I did.
That's really cool. Awesome. I will remind everybody as well, this is a live stream. So if you're watching via YouTube right now, you can comment into the chat and you can ask us anything, including application security, music, and boat building. So those three things, if anybody wants to leave any comments on those or ask any questions on those, you have the next 12 minutes to do that. Or you can add comments after the fact. If you're watching the replay, add your comments about the boat building, the kayak building, and then we can get back to that as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about the 2019 application protection report. Obviously, it's a lot to cover in 12 minutes, but maybe we can talk about how that came about and what you guys cover in it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the application protection report project actually started before I came on board, and it was Ray's project for some time, and essentially the idea was to give a single overarching view of what the threat landscape looked like for a web application, and it has sort of evolved, partly just in response to how other projects in F5 are sort of carving out territory, and last year, 18 months now, when in the beginning of 2019, when I started working with Ray on it, he and I were having a lot of conversations about application architecture. And it was partly because I was coming back into the field and I was trying to catch up on everything that had changed. And really what I found had changed the most in the 3 years or so that I was out of InfoSec was huge changes in terms of application architecture. And so we ended up sort of exploring that as a theme, and we're continuing to do so. And really the short conclusion, or the short version of the conclusions that we're coming to, is that it is a lot of the risk that is real, that is actually manifesting in breaches and loss from information security events, is coming from changes in application architecture, as opposed to attackers coming up with completely novel stuff. And so one of the ways we kind of are framing that is we're essentially saying that the goalposts are being moved on defenders, right? And so it's not that attackers are coming up with these completely, and it's not like Stuxnet level creativity, right? And I don't mean to disparage the attackers. Please don't get any more creative. But so that's really been a big focus, and so that sort of covers a lot of topics like the sort of rise of outsourcing at the hosting level, and sort of third-party services within web applications, as well as the explosion in APIs and the API economy over the last few years. And we're really trying to get a little bit more data and evidence about serverless and containers and microservices architectures too, because obviously that's all sort of tied in with all these other architectural trends. So that's a lot of what we're talking about at the moment. And in particular, that is sort of manifesting, like one of the most interesting things that I'm seeing right now is that in terms of web breaches, meaning breaches that didn't result from phishing or account takeover through credential abuse, but like where people are sort of the stereotypical hack, right? In terms of those kinds of breaches, last year, 87% of them all use the exact same technique. And to be clear, this is based on breaches that organizations in the U.S. reported to the U.S. state attorneys general. So this isn't the entire landscape. This is just the U.S. This is just disclosed breaches. But still, 7 out of 8 of every breach that we looked at that came through a web vector was using an injection technique known as form jacking. And I think it's kind of remarkable, right? We know that the threat landscape, like the actual various threat actors that comprise the malicious end of the spectrum, there's a lot of diversity there, right? So if 7 out of 8 of those folks are thinking that this is how I'm going to attack a web application, that means it's a pretty safe bet. And I mean, I have never seen that level of sort of attacker consensus before. So I think that's really fascinating, and that's something that we're definitely going to be keeping an eye on in going into. Well, actually, we're currently right now in the middle of the research for next year's report. So that's something that we're digging into.
That would be interesting to correlate to maybe what the threat research guys in Tel Aviv see as well, right? They got the honeypots out there. So if they can kind of see, hey, it's form jacking, and they set up their honeypots, and then they see a repeated amount during a threat campaign, and not to tie this all the way back into F5 products, but when it comes to having high accuracy signatures and having something that is relevant for a certain point of time, we have the research team that does the threat campaign. So they pick those up on their honeypots. They see a repeated attack. They can write a custom immediate signature, push it out to everybody. And then at least, for that particular scenario, we can block that right away.
Yeah, absolutely. I will actually say this across the board for the state of application security, but I think it's absolutely true for the form jacking risks that we're seeing right now. It's not that these attacks are either unknown or unblockable. It's that things are changing really fast. A lot of organizations either don't have the budget or just don't have the tooling set up in such a way that they can recognize the risk either proactively or reactively, right? So it's in theory, a lot of these attacks, and in fact, I would say pretty much all of the attacks that we're seeing that are succeeding in breaches right now are easy to mitigate in theory. And then in practice, when we look at the real world and we look at the way that organizations work and we look at the way that environments change, that's when it gets a little bit tricky. But absolutely, we are always sort of looking for opportunities to collaborate more with the Tel Aviv guys. And it would be great if we could continue to build this sort of protection into the F5 product going down the line.
You guys included this really cool chart as well, this matrix of controls. So, you guys clearly define form jacking and then the controls that are available for that. So I think that's just a really good tool for, at the very least, for folks to pick up this report and look at and have some actionable stuff straight out of it, and they can evaluate where they're sitting with this. And then you guys have already done the legwork on figuring out, hey, how relevant are these attacks? And they're all the most relevant ones that you guys picked out, and then all the controls that map to them.
Yeah, that this table was the product of some really, really great conversations with a lot of folks, both a couple or pretty much everybody within F5 Labs, as well as a few external collaborators, folks that have the pulse on the rest of the industry and stuff. And the process of organizing this thing, it wasn't a haggle to figure out kind of which control is going to mitigate which risk, but how to organize the entire thing and kind of how to categorize it was really tricky, which is why some of these things have asterisks. Like the WAF category has an asterisk by it because it doesn't quite fit in the taxonomy, but it was so big and so impactful a control that we had to include it, right? So this thing is like one of those. When I look at this, I just think of like 20 hours of really intense discussions with a lot of really smart people. So this is specifically this table is the output of a group effort, and I have to thank the folks that helped me with it.
Yeah, well, we're really grateful for yourself and folks that you worked with to distill the information into something that is consumable like this. Because, like, yeah, I can imagine there was a lot of stuff to pour through to create something like this. That's very
Yeah,
cool.
and I mean, you just mentioned this a moment ago, and we really do strive to make sure that we're not just bringing bad news, right?
Mm,
Because you bring up bad news, and eventually people just tune you out. So we have to kind of specifically within F5 Labs, we have to kind of strike this tricky balance between giving people information, empowering them to actually protect themselves, right? Because we are trying to help defenders and not just scare everybody. But at the same time, there's so much variation. I mean, you would know as a working as an SE like you do, you environments are different, right? And business models are different, and risk appetites are different. And so we have to strike this balance between a one size fits all approach and not giving any recommendations at all. And so hopefully that table, I mean, one of the bits of feedback I got when we were working on that from another researcher within F5 who doesn't work for labs, he said, these are really broad category, like change control can mean a lot of different things. And I said, yeah, I don't know what everyone's environment looks like. I don't know what's holding them back, and I don't know what tool set they have, but I do know that change control is super important, right? So I really hope that that the table at this level of granularity is useful to people. And in turn, if anyone's listening and you look at this table and you think that it should be more granular or less or whatever, we welcome the feedback. Always, in general, I would say for anybody, if you have thoughts about F5 Labs work, please get in touch and let us know.
yeah. And you know what? Even if a category is broad, then maybe that opens up a conversation, and that's maybe a conversation that needed to be had at that organization anyways. And
Yep.
so, we'll you guys are packaging in, and then maybe people have to unpackage it and they need to look deeper into it. So
Yep.
still very relevant, regardless of, what lens you're looking at it with. Very cool. We got about a minute left, actually. This flew by really quick here. Nobody so far, I'm keeping an eye on the comments. No kayak questions yet. I still invite them. You have 1 minute to ask any of your kayaking questions or kayak building questions or any musical questions as well. Any parting thoughts on the application protection report?
A lot of what we're looking into right now is a pretty linear continuation of the conclusions we were at last year, and I'm right kind of today and tomorrow in process of the first of several new articles we're going to write about API risk, and it's an interesting thing because in between the time when we first started writing about API security, which the first thing that Labs did about that was something that Ray published in October 2018. Or maybe November. In between then and now, there's been this huge explosion in awareness about the risk of APIs. So the secret's out on both sides, defenders and attackers. Everybody realized that this is a thing. But at the same time, it's sort of like there are 70 different conversations being had about it at the same time. And they're all a little bit different. And so what we're really trying to do is, based on the evidence that we have, which is always going to be kind of partial. It's really, really hard to get a completely clear view in security. But based on that information, we're trying to sort of go back to things that everyone can agree on and like establish some baselines about APIs for good and for bad, for risk and reward, and sort of hopefully provide a little bit of coherence there. So APIs as sort of the most prominent architectural shift or the most obvious architectural shift. That's a really, really big part of what we're talking about. We also really want to get into third-party risk, and I have sort of a hypothesis there that I haven't been able to test yet, which is essentially about third-party risk for organizations that are extremely consolidated in terms of their customer base, or like people that identify a niche and all their customers are the same. Does that actually drive up risk for the customers? And I saw a few campaigns over the last 2 years where people or software suppliers had identified a really, really specific niche and had all these customers that were exactly the same. And that's awesome for business. because you can really, really tailor your product to the needs of your customers until somebody finds a vulnerability in your software. And then an entire sub vertical just gets knocked down in a single weekend, right? So that we've been sort of throwing around the idea of enfilade risk, which is this sort of pseudo military term. And that's a hypothesis that I've yet untested. And so that's something that we're hoping to dig into a little bit more. So I'd stay tuned. We are really excited about the new APR research, and hopefully it'll be useful to folks. And we are going to start publishing stuff. I know it's already halfway through 2020, but we're going to start publishing those soon. And hopefully the cadence will stay steady and we can get a lot of work out in the next couple months.
Very cool. Looking forward to that. Oh, one more thing. Were you like actually responsible for writing the text of the application report?
Most of it, yeah.
Wow, cool. If folks haven't checked it out yet, head to f5labs.com, look under application protection, and you'll see the report there. I think you're a great writer. I actually found it, your writing style was actually pretty neat in the way you illustrated.
Oh, wow.
So
thank you. I appreciate that. It's, you know, my undergrad education was at a place that took writing extremely seriously. And I would say that I sort of got raked over the coals when I first showed up there. I thought I was a pretty cool writer, and I got kind of destroyed. So it's always nice. I appreciate the compliment, and it's something that I take a little bit of pride in. So thank you.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's a great style. Awesome, folks. Hold on here. Oh, we have one question here. From Satyajit. Hi, any links, videos to study API security? Do you have any suggestions on that, Sander?
I do, yeah. I would say a great place to begin is with some of the API content at F5 Labs. And I'm not just doing that to promote our own stuff, but it's partly because Debbie Walkowski has just written a really extraordinarily good article that's sort of intro to APIs kind of at a very broad scale. And I would actually recommend that anybody who isn't actually working in API security or developing for APIs right now, even if you think you're experienced, go back and check out that Learning Center article, because again, I think it's really valuable for everyone in the industry to kind of level set and get coherent, get on the same page about terminology and about concepts. So I'd say start with Debbie's thing. One of our other researchers, Sean, from who lives in Singapore, he just released an article within F5 Labs about an API capture the flag event that he's been running in a lot of the Asia Pacific region. So that's a good place to go. Ray and I have a couple articles on API stuff. After the F5 Lab stuff, there is actually a really fantastic site called apisecurity.io. And they have a weekly newsletter where they're doing usually 3 short snippets of information about some interesting API event, either a breach, a vuln finding. There's a lot of training on there. In fact, they have links to certifications you can do on API. So apisecurity.io is a fantastic site. We've been using them for open source information for a while now. Who else? Oh, Programmable Web is also, yeah. So that site is awesome. I've learned a lot just from reading that. Programmable Web is actually it's a directory of APIs. These guys host, so essentially once you publish an API, you can go log it at Programmable Web, and they are more on the, I don't know, I hope if they hear this, I hope it doesn't offend them for me to say that they're more on like the cheerleader side of APIs, because they're very much emphasizing the upsides of APIs. And to be clear, the upsides of APIs are huge, but they do also talk about API security. And so there is some really valuable information there. Those are probably 2 of the more valuable single sites, but there's a ton of information out there. So that's a great place to start. And from there, you'll see a lot more links.
Awesome. Cool. So I'll post those in the show notes. That was a great question. So love having that type of interaction there. Great to have you on, Sander.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd love to have you on in future for more stuff too, talking about the articles that you're bringing out and whatnot. So it'll be great to have a recurring guest.
Absolutely, anytime.
Cool, awesome. So I will bring us out here. Again, anybody who has not subscribed yet, hit subscribe down below. It'll be under Sanders' name over on that side. Check out the newsletter. And otherwise, this Friday, I'll have on David Wood, and we will talk about the cool organizations that he's been building that are doing really good work in the world. So check that out Friday at 11 o'clock. All right. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for checking this out today. If you're watching via YouTube right now, go ahead and click subscribe down below. Also click the bell for notifications. That way you will find out when we are dropping a new video or when we're going live. Also, there's darylamboo.com. If you head over to that, leave your name and email address, we will drop a weekly technical newsletter in your inbox every Monday. Also, this is available via podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify. Head over to one of those, hit subscribe, and you'll be able to listen to us in the car, on your commute, or during a walk or a run. Thank you very much, and we will see you next time.